Hello everyone, I am Rod and I am the game design instructor for the Academy of Entertainment Arts over at Dixie Hollins High School. If you are one of my students, it's Mr. Flowers to you, and welcome to this video tutorial. Good evening everyone. Today we're going to look at this GameMaker 2 tutorial on how to set up a 2D side-scroller slash platformer style game. For this, we're going to need a GameMaker Studio 2, and we're going to be using the GameMaker language. So go ahead and set up a new project and choose GameMaker language. Now I'm going to be doing this off the top of my head, so you're going to see whatever errors I'm going to make, and hopefully you'll be able to correct them with me, see how I solve them. You can see I have a pre-made one here, side-scroller demo. I'm just going to rename this. I started recording last night, but I was just way too tired. I'll just save over that. Yep, that's fine. So before we start hammering away at all the code, we need some sprites. For this, I'm just going to create a basic sprite. First things first, I'll do a group. I'll call this my player group. And inside my player group, I'm going to create a sprite. This is going to be spr_player. I am going to move a little bit quickly just because of time and recording of the video. Hopefully, if you're in here, you've had some experience in GameMaker. This isn't going to be a step-by-step sort of thing. It's just going to be a little bit faster paced. Now with my player, I'm going to set up a few different sprites. And the reason I'm doing this is so that we can kind of cycle between them. And you'll see why we're going to do that a little bit later. But for now, I'm just going to make a basic thing. So I'm going to do sprite player and then underscore. This is going to be my idle frame. And in here, I'm going to just create a basic sprite. I'm going to change my size. I'm going to do 128 for the width and roughly 256 for the height. Hit apply. And that'll give us a sprite-shaped or a person-shaped kind of box. I'll hit Edit Image. And then in here, I'm just going to make some sort of basic shape. I'm not going to do too much detail. As a matter of fact, I'm just going to fill this in with just some color. Let's see, I'll pick soft blue, that'll work. Now to make this look somewhat different, I'm just going to write the words idle on it. So grab a text. I'll say IDLE. Font size. That'll work. Let me grab. I'm trying not to be too OCD, but I'm just going to center this up here. And I'll just fill that back in. You know, I kind of like that little happy accident, but I'm going to get rid of it. There's my idle frame. I'm just going to duplicate this. So on the sprite, I'm going to click duplicate. And this is going to be my player walk left. Edit image. I'm just going to draw the appropriate words here. Clear that off. Whoops. Text. Now, if you guys happen to have a sprite for this, you're welcome to add it. I'm just throwing something together. Whoops. Just to be quick. And then I'll duplicate that one, and this one will be called walk right. fill that in. Yeah, it's fine. And then lastly, we need a animation for when it jumps. So I'm going to duplicate this. And this is going to be called player jump. Same deal. Hey, that worked out pretty well. Alright, so there's my player pieces. And I will need a wall, so I'm going to go ahead and close this up. On sprites, I'm going to add a new group. I'm going to call this, I'll do walls. And inside here, I'm going to create just one wall, spr underscore wall. And my wall size is going to be 128 by 128. Sometimes my 8 sticks. There we go. And then inside here, I will make a simple wall. Let me grab a decent sized box. Turn our grid on. Let's make these. These are 16 by 16. Yeah, that'll work. Grid snap. I'll do a gray color on the exterior and a lighter gray on the interior. That should work. Alright, let's go ahead and create some objects. So create, we're going to do obj underscore player. This will be our object for our player. Now we do have several sprites for our player object. We're going to use our player object to look at these sprites here. So I hit add event. Now we're going to do, before we add the event, let's add our idle sprite. That way when the game starts, we have our idle position. Add event, create. Just going to call this initialize variables. Our player can move left and right, so velocity x, we'll set that to 0. Can also move up and down, so velocity y. It has a move speed, we'll do 12. We have a jump speed. This is going to be whenever we're jumping, how fast we move up. I'll set this to, I'll do 8 for now, but we'll probably change it. What else do we need here? Just some basic stuff. Oh, we do need to figure out which way our character is facing, so we'll have a is facing variable. Right now we're just going to set that to, when he starts, he's probably going to be facing to the right, so we'll just do facing right. And we'll need a state. This is going to determine what our character is doing. So the state is currently idle. Okay. Now when we set up our character, we really didn't have, for our idle, we didn't have it actually facing anything, so I'm going to go ahead and end my idle. I'm just going to edit this image here. I'm going to put a little arrow so I know which way it's facing. So idle, and I'll do a triangle. See if I can do a triangle. There we go, idle facing that way. I'll just copy this, paste it, and I'll do a triangle facing the other way. Cool. I'll just fill in the old one. Yes, yes. There we go. So now I have an idle facing right, idle facing left. Because our character can face one direction or the other. I'll do the same thing on the jump. So I'm going to do a jump facing right or left. Yes. Oops. Copy, paste. Now, if you find me going a little bit too quick for you, you are welcome to pause the video and back it up at any point in time. Miracle of technology. Okay. That'll work. Jump back down to our player object. So we have our positions here. We'll have other stats, like if we're alive or if we have any levels that we can gain, so on and so forth. But this should be good for now. If we have to add anything, we'll do it later. I'm going to add an event, do a step event. I'm just going to call this update player. Now to get this working, there are a few ways we can take it. We can use a state machine, which controls what state our character is in and what he can do in that state. We can use a series of if statements to basically do the same thing. It really depends on how our character works and the things we want to do during each state. If it's like Mario, you really don't need a state machine. You only have a few states you can really be in. If you're doing like a fighting game, you might want to set up a state machine and have more finite control. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is set up a simple situation to where if we're facing a direction and what state we're in. So I'm going to do which way are we facing? And I'll say if is facing is right, then sprite index. My underscore does not want to work. Sprite index is set to spr underscore. And you know, when I set up these idles, I actually ended up putting these on the same frame. That's not that big of a deal. We can just tell it to use the image index for that. But it is cleaner. It's cleaner for my OCD to set these up on their own sprites. But no matter, I will just fix that. So I'll just call this idle underscore left. And I'll do else if is facing is left, then sprite index set to spr underscore player idle right. Now the reason these are turning not red is we only have one idle. So I'm going to go in there, I'm going to duplicate this, just move that up. So this one will be idle left, and I will just select my, say I have the two frames here. I'm going to right click on the one that's pointing to the right, and I will just cut it. I will open up the other one, And then I have my one that's facing left. Okay, get rid of that one. Yep. Call this one left. Or this one's right. Sorry. So idle left, idle right. And we'll do the same thing for the jump. I know. I'm just running all over the place. Duplicate. Left. This one, I'll delete that one. This one will be right. Yep, good enough. There's an upside and a downside to me doing this off the top of my head. Upside is you get to see all my mistakes. Downside is you have to see my mistakes. Okay, so we're checking for facing left and facing right. If we are, cool, we do one of these. And then inside of here, for facing left or right, we need to check if we're moving. So inside of facing right, we're going to check to see if our velocity x, and we're actually moving to the right, so I got to switch this. This should be to the right, and then this one should be to the left. So if our velocity x is greater than 0, then we're going to have this be sprite index is equal to spr underscore player. We're going to do walk to the right. Else if velocity x is equal to 0, then we're going to be on our idle state. So if we have some sort of movement speed, then we're going to be moving to the right for that animation. Otherwise, we'll be moving nowhere. We're at our idle. That should do that. Do the same thing in here. And there are simpler ways of doing this. I'm just not thinking them right now. Vx less than 0. Sprite index spr score player. We're going to do walk to the left. Else if Vx is equal to 0, then we do that one. Do that. And now we need to update our ability to walk. So I'm going to say move player based on velocity. So x is plus equal to Vx, and y is plus equal to Vy. So that our x or y position increments based on the velocity here. So this should be enough to get us to look left or right. Now we have to set up some controls first before this will work. So let's jump into our objects over here and create two game objects. We need the object game itself. So obj underscore game. This will be controlling our game functions. And I need an input object as well. So create, and this is going to be obj underscore input. I'm going to put these in different groups just because I'm OCD. So add a group, and I'll throw, this will be the player group. And then I'll make a new group. This is going to be the system group. I'll throw these guys in there. And let's go set up the object game. So object game needs a create event, some basic variables. So I'm going to do initialize variables. Object game needs a state. Right now we're going to do in game. And we need some globals. Let's do global dot grav. We don't want to do gravity because it's a built-in GameMaker variable, and I really don't like using their internal variables unless I have to. So I'm going to set that to 0.98. And I'm going to create the object input. So create object input. So instance create depth. This is going to have a depth or an x and y position of the game object. A depth of 0 because we're never going to see this object, and we're going to be calling object input. We'll add more as we go, but this should get us started. And then inside the input object, we're going to set up our buttons. So add event, create event, initialize buttons. And this is going to be button left, keyboard, I got a new keyboard, check. And this is going to be ORD. I'm going to use the WASD keys. So this is going to be, to go left, it'll be A. And if you want to use a joystick, I'll set up joystick controls, and I'll do for gamepad button check. And then we want our device, so our device is going to be 0, whatever the first device is. And then the button index will be gamepad underscore pad left. So for moving left, button left is going to be pulled to either the keyboard A key or the gamepad pad left key. Button right is going to be keyboard check. ORD for the letter key, and then this is going to be going to the right will be the D key, and or gamepad button check. Our first device is device 0, and the gamepad button is pad right. And a little bit OCD, I almost always put up and down before my left and right. It's just something I do. It doesn't really matter, it's just me. So button up, that's going to be keyboard check, ORD. My up key is going to be W. And it's going to be gamepad button check, 0. Gamepad pad up. And for the sake of simplicity, I will just duplicate this. So copy and paste it. And I will change this button to the S key. And this will be gamepad down. So that's pad D. And it looks like I might be missing a brace. I see. I have 2 B's in my keyboard. So the downside about copy pasting, if you have an error, you copy and paste your error. I usually tell folks do not copy paste, but broke my own rule and got bit in the butt for it. And I also need a button start. So I give these things a designation. So this is going to be movement buttons. And then down here, I'll call this system buttons, because these ones interact with the menus and stuff. So I'll go ahead and just paste that last button. This will be button start, keyboard check. That's going to be, get rid of the ORD. I'm going to use VK underscore enter. That's the virtual keyboard enter key. And on my gamepad here, this is going to be gamepad start. And what else am I missing up here? Got W, prerequisite expected, da 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 da. Aha, I'm missing a parenthesis. There we go. And I need a jump button. But I'm not going to call it button jump. I'm going to call it whatever my jump button is going to be on the gamepad. So button, I'm going to configure this to a PlayStation controller. So I'm going to have X be my jump button. And I'm just going to say keyboard check. And in this case, I'm going to do VK _space. Or I'm going to do gamepad _button check. And then the X button on there. So to bring up the wiki, you can just middle mouse click on the text, and it should try to... Okay, so the wiki is open. I'm going to scroll down. I was hoping to get more on all the device buttons here. Gamepad input. There we go. So here's our controller. This one looks like it's mapped to an Xbox controller, which is fine. I want the lower button. So for me on a PlayStation controller, the lower button here is the X button, and that's gamepad face 1. So I'm going to go back to my input object, gamepad face 1. Cool. Now I did notice that I made a little bit of an error, which is I wrote all this in the create event, wrong event. The create event doesn't actually see this stuff, it just initializes everything. So what I'm going to do is copy this into the step event. So add event, step, step. Go ahead and copy this. Go to my step event, I'll go ahead and paste that here. I'll just call this update buttons. And then in the create event, I'm just going to clear these off. Just give all these a false. Because when the game starts, none of these are going to be polled. So false. You have to forgive me. I more or less work a 12-hour day. So doing this is quite exhausting after a certain point. Right about now, it's about 9:30. I'm usually napping by 6. So just to put it in perspective here. There we go. So we have our create event, and then our step event. Looks good. That should get us going. We just need to set up a room and some input for our character. So I'm going to close down the character here. I'll go ahead and close down this part. Let's make a new group. We're going to call this walls. And I'm going to put this just under the player group. And I will add a object. I'm going to do obj_wall for now. And I'm just going to give this the sprite of our wall. Nothing special in it just yet. And then we're going to need to create a script. So under scripts, right click, create. And I'm just going to do this as check player input. And then in my check player input script is where we're going to really write all of our inputs for our game. So when this thing starts, we want it to check to make sure that the player is actually alive. So I'm going to go ahead and give this some 3 braces up here, or 3 slashes. I'm going to call this check player input. This just shows people who are in here what this is going to look like when it's written and what arguments it's going to accept. Right now it's accepting nothing, but later on we might have to pass a variable or something through there. We'll have to see. And I'm going to say if object input dot button left. So if we push the left button, something's going to happen. So this is going to be walk left. So if we hit the left button, then we're going to look to the player object and figure out how much we're going to increase its speed. So object player dot vx, that's its velocity, x, is going to be set to some value. So that's going to be, if you want him to gradually increase in speed, then you would do plus equals the move speed, or some value and then whichever. I'm just going to set it directly to the move speed. So I'm going to say equal to move speed. But because I'm moving to the left, it's going to be a negative value because I'm going towards 0. So minus move speed. I got to get a new keyboard. Another thing's going to happen when we hit the left key. We're also going to face left. So above this piece, just to keep my brain sane, it's going to be object player dot is facing, and that will be set to left. And we're going to do else if button underscore right. Make sure we put the object, so obj underscore input dot button right. Then we will be moving to the right. So object player dot is facing is now to the right. And obj vx is going to be a positive move speed. Now if we were accelerating our player, so like we started moving at a certain speed and we kind of increase as we go, we could set a cap here, but right now we don't need to. We'll come back into it later if we want. So now I have, if I push a button, I move left. If I push the other button, I move right. Now we want a situation that if we're pushing no button, then we're going to be idle. So let's go ahead and do an else. So else, in this particular condition, we have 3 possibilities. We can be moving left, or moving right, or doing nothing. Later when we add our jump ability, we will want to modify that. And then in here, all we're going to do is set the velocity to 0. So obj underscore player dot vx is 0. We don't have to tell it which direction because it's already set. So if we hit this key, it'll set the direction. If we take our hand off the key, it'll set the move speed to 0, but it'll still have the direction because we haven't changed it yet. We will need to set up an idle case though. So I'm going to set state, so obj player.state will be set to idle. In these two, we're going to have the state set to walking. So I'm going to go up here, so obj underscore player.state, we'll just set that to walking. And for shorthand, I'm just going to leave that walk. And that'll work. So far, so good. We can go ahead and exit this part. Let's go back to our player. We'll add that piece to our player step event. So in here, we're going to do check input, check for input, so check player input. So that'll get checked. That's short. Let's test to see how this is going to work. Let's jump into our room here. I'm going to rename this room I'll say level 1. Gonna jump in, open up my wall, make sure I'm under instances, and I'm just gonna add my wall in. It's a big wall. But my player is also pretty big, so here's my player in comparison to my wall. So with my walls here, I can just hold down the Alt key, and I can just paint walls here. There we go. Let me do some other stuff to make it kind of interesting in here. I'll need a ceiling tile. Later I'll make the room bigger, but this should work for now. So here's that. I need my game object. So let's open up my system and add in my game object. It doesn't matter where this goes. I'll just put it here. We do not need to add an input object because our game object creates it. And let's just run this and see what happens. So here we are, and let's check our keys. So when I move to the right, you can see it's moving right. Move to the left, it is moving left. That works, and it goes back to idle. Sweet. And you can see that if I hit the key and let go, my idle is facing the last place I was looking. Go this way, it's facing right, that way, facing left. That part works. Awesome. Now I do pass through the walls. We haven't set those up yet. And I do see an error where my left is not showing my little arrow. So I'm going to go check that. So sprites, player, walk to the left. I see. I guess I never wrote the arrows. Go ahead and put those on there. Let's grab that and white. Helps if I point in the correct direction. There we go. And then on right, I will just go ahead and add a right arrow. Good. Good enough. Sweet. So moving to the right, you can see the arrow. Moving to the left, the arrow. Okay. So this is our basic setup for our platformer. In the next tutorial, we'll go over setting up the jump functions and collision with the wall. Alright, and I will see you in the next video.